want to give some very good news to the Malaysians. We are seeing real economic growth. Why the ringgit strengthened so much?
Right.
How did the ringgit fall to the 25-year low?
Okay.
And then in 6 months recovered to the best performing currency. If you complain about the government last time, you got to praise him today. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Hardish. And this is the Economy Rice Podcast.
It's where we focus on things related to the economy and things that are related to your rice bowl. So Hardish, have you heard the recent news?
About?
The ringgit has strengthened from 4.7 to 4.4 recently.
Yeah.
And it happened in the space of just 6 months. And if you recall, last October 2023, the ringgit actually fell to the lowest level in 25 years.
We were, I think, the second worst performing currency
in the world, right?
Yeah. Was it? Against second last only to Japanese yen, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, that's right. I mean, I'm sure it's ancient history by now, but at the time, everyone was complaining about it.
Yes.
Right? And of course, the yen is an outlier in and of itself. So the implication is that we are kind of the worst performing in the world.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, do you know that Indonesia's IDR Rupiah, correct?
Right.
You know it's actually doing worse than us. Maybe at the worst point, they were meagerly better.
Right.
But
I think at that point in time,
at
that point in time, during that period, right, which caused a lot of
right.
I mean, basically the government really took a hard hit for that. Well, fairly or unfairly, right?
But actually, it's even underperforming to this day,
Right.
Like it's still holding the mantle of like almost the worst performing currencies. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but sounds bad. Anyway, yeah. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about why the ringgit strengthened so much, right? I think our first episode we talked about why the ringgit fell.
Yes.
Right? So this is the reverse of it.
Okay.
How did the ringgit fall to the 25-year low?
Okay.
And then in 6 months recovered to the best performing currency.
I think you're probably going to get into it, but also, I mean, from the reverse side of the previous episode, right?
Right.
Is also like the same way where the government was blamed for the ringgit falling.
Yeah.
Can the government now take credit for the ringgit?
Right.
Okay.
So we need to be fair. If you complain about the government last time, you got to praise him today.
I mean, I don't know, but maybe we'll get into it. Right?
Okay. So anyway, independent of who gets the credit, right? We are just here to explain what are the economic factors behind the ringgit's recent rise. Okay. So, I want to clarify, all this data is taken from MIDF, right? And I want to give credit to them. They've done an excellent job at the research, right? And I cannot thank them enough for this. Okay. So MIDF actually did forecast something very amazing as part of the ringgit's rise. If you analyze quarter two performance, it could potentially have 5% GDP growth this year.
The general expectation was what, 4.2 or something?
I mean, if you go by even 6 months ago, the sentiment, right, you would have expected to be like 3.5, right?
Okay.
5% is literally like 50% more.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's worth making a comparator here. 5% implies better than China.
Right. Okay.
Right? Like China has a goal of 5%, right? If we can achieve 5%, that implies we're better than China. And we are Malaysia, right?
Okay.
So I think that's quite an ambitious case. And if you're a business in 2024, good for you, right? Okay. So I think we just jump straight into it.
Okay.
Why has the ringgit strengthened?
Yes.
So just a bit of recap. The ringgit has strengthened 7% in the past 6 months alone. Okay, from the worst point to the highest point. So that's about 4.7 to 4.4. To give you a bit of context, how big 7% rise in currency is. So remember recently the yen fell due to unwinding of a carry trade. So albeit overnight, that one fell 6%. It was enough to rock the entire world, right? Including the US economy. So of course we didn't do that overnight, but we had the same quantum of improvement in 6 months, right? That is massive. There are 3 broad reasons why ringgit actually rose.
Okay.
The first one is financial factors. So think about inflation, interest rates, Those are financial factors.
We're talking about inflation, Malaysian inflation, right?
It can be related to US as well, right? And we will understand why later.
Okay.
The second is that there's actually been a legitimate improvement in our economic fundamentals. I'm sure everyone knows, right? About 6 to 9 months ago, right, if you were a business, you would be looking at very tough days, right? And I've been telling my friends at the time that, in the economy, they seem to be showing signs of improvement, like hold it up. That seems to be what have played out. And finally, who can forget, obviously the biggest factors involved would be export imports, right? Because those are what increases and decreases the demand for ringgit. So let's go into all of this, right?
Okay.
Want to guess what the first one is, Hardish?
We were talking about the inflation, right?
Yes. I think inflation has been a boogeyman for the past couple of years, right? And it's certainly been a politicized topic. So I think inflation has a very negative connotation to it for very good reasons, and also because it tends to require the central bank to react by hiking interest rates. Who else is worse at this than the US Federal Reserve, right? They have raised rates from 1.25% to 5% in the span of a very short span of time, and they've kept it there for the longest time. In fact, it's still there today. And this has created all kinds of knock-on effects. For instance, the recent resignation of Bangladeshi President Hassani. The main reason behind that,
forced resignation lah.
Yeah, I mean, technically a resignation.
Practically a coup lah, but
yeah. But I mean, the conditions that enabled the coup were actually the very high interest rate differential between the taka, the local currency, and the US dollar. So it has created a lot of outflows from Bangladeshi. And because they are very labor-focused economy, it's very dependent or very affected by inflation import, right? So obviously, if the money flows out of the country, they can't pay their IMF loans, it hurts the community, right? And that has all kinds of snowball effects.
And if I'm not mistaken, all of that led to what was basically there was a problem in the job market, then which they introduced a quota, and that is what led to the people basically taking to the streets, right? So I mean, just to simplify, this inflation stuff does result in real pain for real people on the street, to the point that they actually take to the streets and overthrow the government.
Yes. I mean, you could argue that Malaysia also kind of felt that way a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So very high interest rate differentials in favor of the USD will then create liquidity outflow. Right? And liquidity is basically demand for the ringgit. And that caused the ringgit to fall.
And this was the whole argument at that episode that we did, where a lot of people were saying that the central bank needs to raise interest rates to be, competitive, right? So that there's no outflows. And we were making the argument that, I mean, you have to take it, in relative terms, lah, right? Even if you raise, also, it's not going to be enough because the differential is actually so high, right?
Right.
We're also going to talk about how now, with the hindsight of looking back, the central bank did the right thing by practically not doing anything.
I guess you could say so, right? Because if you recall during our World Bank episode, so shameless plug for those two, watch our first and second episodes. At the time, we already saw some very strong indicators of economic improvement. First of all, SME bank loans were improving, the approvals. And second of all, tourist arrivals were increasing. So of course, there's always a lag between coincident data and the actual trickle-down effect that you feel at businesses and the consumer level. Now we feel it a few months later, but even then you could have seen the data, right? And I'm sure BNM also considered these improving data points when they made a statement that said that actually the ringgit is undervalued. Right? That was just 4 months of Asian history ago.
Yes.
Right? So the same reverse effect is happening now, right? Where because of our moderate inflation effects, I'll go into it later, right? As well as the biggest impact is the US is expected to reduce interest rates. So it's the opposite of what caused the ringgit to fall earlier. Right? Now the ringgit is going to increase or strengthen, and the reason is also because the USD is falling. Of course, if you look at the USD, US interest rates today, it's still 5.25%, right?
Yes.
And in fact, Powell actually said he will only consider reducing in September. So why this improvement in ringgit? It's because markets anticipate future events, and it's almost certain from the economy standpoint that they will reduce interest rates soon. So now you're just seeing the opposite of what happened to the ringgit earlier, right? And it's coming back in. All right. So this is just USD interest rate differential, okay? Ringgit relative to USD, right? It fell earlier. The ringgit fell earlier because US interest rates are high. Now the ringgit is improving. The biggest factor is because US interest rates are coming down. And so of course interest rates coming down, the interest rate differential coming down is one thing, but the actual liquidity inflows and outflows, they are represented by a few things, right? So one is trade, your imports and exports, because if you have more trade, it increases demand for your product, and then that will increase demand for the ringgit, which pushes the forex up. Another big impact is FDI and portfolio capital. So I don't think I really need to go FDI. In fact, we actually did an episode on this, right? You already have heard in the news all the recent FDI stuff, right? There's also one reverse FDI involving Tesla, right? Right? But anyway.
Tesla is,
You got any personal grievances to voice?
So, To begin with, right? I mean, I never thought this Tesla deal was really a deal to begin with.
Right.
And this got nothing really much to do with economics. I just think that the CEO of Tesla is a very fickle-minded person, right? I mean, it literally is like, he can decide on the whim, right? If he wants to do something or not. Tesla is really suddenly losing a lot of his early advantage.
Right.
If you look at who are the biggest movers in EV right now, is China EV companies that are outselling Tesla, right?
Yes.
So that is going to bound to have impact on Tesla's investments, right? In terms of what they need to do strategically. Like, why would you count investing in Malaysia as a priority for Tesla? It wouldn't be a priority for Tesla, right? They would, like, if anything, they would now think about how do I defend my European and American markets.
This one is the supercharger network, right? Yeah, it
is.
is. Right?
Yeah. Well, supercharger. So that's the thing. It's like, okay, let's not digress. But very quickly, right? Some people say they're supposed to open a factory. Some people say no, it's just supposed to be the supercharger network. Yeah, so there's all these things, right?
Right.
Basically, Tesla is struggling at the moment in comparison to their Chinese competitors.
Right.
So obviously, they're going to start putting their money where they really can get a lot more advantage. And I don't think Malaysia is it. That's it, right? It's not.
And Elon Musk, if you want a chance to defend yourself against these allegations, you're free to come to our podcast. Okay, just a joke. Anyway, so going back, right? So FDI actually is improved, and it's not just Tesla, right? It's also things like Infineon, Intel, as well as the recent Sarawak one. Sarawak, actually pay attention to them. Their economy is really going to boom. Infrastructure.
Oh, on the energy side, yes. So on the energy side, I've been keeping track.
Right. What have you been seeing? Just
I would say that Sarawak is probably going to be a key player in renewable energy. Maybe we can consider doing a whole different episode on this.
Yes.
Moving forward with anything that we want to talk about FDI, right? If you look at the type of FDI, one of the key components for any of these FDIs to realize its true potential is energy. Right? And Sarawak is positioning itself as the center of energy, renewable energy. If you look at the policy documents, it's kind of amazing what they're trying to do. And I think it warrants a separate episode.
No, I'm 100% on board. I think it would be super interesting to do a full episode just on Sarawak economics. But anyway, let's get back to FDI, right? Okay, the portfolio capital is actually effectively FDI. Because if you think about it, right, let's say I do a IPO. So that is effectively the same as FDI, correct? Primary investments. When I buy a share on the secondary market, so like on the share market, on the stock market, I am liquidating the original IPO funds and replacing it. And of course, I'm paying either a premium or a discount to the original IPO funds. But effectively, I'm replacing the IPO amount funding and I am actually replacing the FDI.
Right.
So that's what portfolio capital represents. Okay. And now you know why people care about share price so much. Right. And very, very interesting. In both the equity and bond markets, two developments. Okay. In the equity market, so of course the first 6 months of 2024, there was a lot of outflows, right?
Yes.
And that contributed to also the weakness of the ringgit.
Yes.
So you want to guess how much is it?
For the outflows?
Yeah.
I think we covered it, but I can't remember now. It was
it's 850 million.
Okay.
You want to guess how much the inflows were during July alone?
July alone?
Yeah.
2 billion?
Okay, so no, it's not so good. It's 1.3 billion.
Okay.
So if you count, right, it's actually about 50% more than the outflows in the first 6 months. So that actually explains a lot about the recent share price improvements in July. A lot of foreign money is coming back in, and a lot of this has also to do with the interest rate differential improving. Right. And in the bond market, there hasn't been, at least as of this MIDF report, they haven't really released indicators about whether the bond MGS, right, Malaysian government securities, whether there's been higher bond purchasing activity in 10-year MGSs, right, which is the standard benchmark for this kind of thing. But the market price, which is a real-time indicator, you can actually see the yield come down. Very sharply, right? So if you actually look at the July data, you can see it went up like this during June and it came down like this. And the reason, or at least the implication you can make is that, the inference you can make is that people are buying because yield and price of bonds tend to be inversely correlated, right? And this is real-time data, so you can count on it being correct. The other thing is, okay, so coming back to what you were saying, how is our inflation improving?
Right.
So inflation is really more about fundamentals than just fund flows, right? But actually, if you look at the data, our OPR has been flat, right? And the BNM has kept it that way. And part of the reason of that is because if you look at the chart, right, you can see that our core inflation, removing the volatile components, has been on a downtrend since something like mid-2023. So let me clarify, there are two ways to measure inflation. One is called headline inflation, one is called core inflation. Headline inflation includes energy inflation and food inflation. And these two components tend to be very volatile, right? Seasonal, month to month.
Yeah.
So we use core inflation to represent the real economy inflation. And core inflation has just been improving non-stop since at least the end of last year, right? So quite 7 months.
Really? Even with... but didn't we see a spike after the diesel subsidy?
So that would be headline inflation,
Okay.
right? Because that's part of energy.
Right.
And
Okay.
yes, you are correct. Actually, in July, or I think even in June, we saw headline inflation spike. So yes, definitely you're 100% correct. Headline inflation did spike because of diesel target subsidies. But more important, the economic barometer would be core inflation. So it would be things like rent, things like supplies, and I'm quite surprised how well it's doing.
Actually, I have a funny anecdote.
Right.
It's, just related very quickly to the diesel subsidy, right?
Right.
So the whole idea was that one of the arguments is people are making is that if you remove diesel subsidy, it would probably you will see the impact in fresh producers or like food producers, right? Because a lot of the machinery and farm equipment and all that is diesel. But then the government's argument is that they are going to get sort of fleet cars or that particular segment will get. The funny thing I found out
is they haven't got it yet.
No. If you go to Cameron Highlands, and this is true for a lot of areas where plantation, right? Yeah, they use cars that what's called Kereta Mayat. These are cars that basically are inside a plantation. They don't bother with registration and stuff like that. They don't bother renewing the road tax. So actually, they were never able to go and register for this, the actual subsidy. In fact, what happened was, and this was from one of my friends who work with a lot of these farmers. These farmers actually were stuck, so they had to actually raise prices because they couldn't get the subsidy. So they had to pay the new diesel prices. So this is just one ways that there are always leakages, lah. Yeah. Anyway.
Is the government helping them in any way?
I mean, it's a jeopardy, right? Because it's like if you wanted to get the subsidy, you would have to go and admit to JPJ that I actually have not renewed my road tax for these trucks for 4 or 5 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think you're kind of stuck. You just have to deal with it, lah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're wondering why your vegetables are still a bit higher, this might be one of it.
So actually, this is actually a very good seek to explaining why capitalism is so effective, right? It's because it really decentralizes the information transfer.
Right.
You find out this kind of character mind.
Yeah.
Right? Because people start complaining about palm oil prices.
Yep.
Okay, anyway, let's go on. So, I want to give some very good news to the Malaysians. Have you been depressed over the past 6 months? Right? Don't be depressed for the next 6 months, right? We are seeing real economic growth. Okay? So, let us start with two very popular indexes. On the DOSM, which is the Department of Statistics Malaysia website, you can find 3 broad indexes called the leading indicator, the coincident indicator, and the lagging indicator. As the name implies, the leading indicator actually tracks indicators which are forward-looking.
Okay.
So think about things like construction, industrial activity, business formation. These are mainly surveys, and they are not really based on hard data, but they are telling you, if let's say you are a businessman and you are making investments, it means you plan to make money, right?
Yeah.
So these are leading indicators, right? We have coincident indicators, which are more present-day economic indicators. And these are things that are like, your industrial production index, your EPF contributions. They are backward-looking, but they represent what is happening in the present day. So it's not really something so useful to imply what will happen in the future.
Okay.
Because obviously, that can change, but it will tell you what is happening today. And there's, of course, the lagging indicators, which are very late. Relevant to the ringgit's rise, leading indicator in July has seen a sharp spike.
Okay.
Some of them include liquidity, construction, manufacturing. Out of the 7 indicators that DOSM recognizes in the leading indicator, 4 of them are showing expansion. I'm not sure if that means that the other 3 are showing contraction. Right? But this is just the opposite news from the first 6 months. This is great, this is great. This is the opposite of what you're seeing in US macro.
Okay.
In the coincident indicators, so these are more like supplier prices, even inflation, stuff like that, right? In 3 components, they never really say how many they actually use. You are seeing the most rapid expansion in the past 2 months.
Okay.
I'm not sure how strong that is in terms of forecasting, but still good news, right? Actually, if you look into the breakdown of GDP by segment, so retail, distributed trade, private consumption, right? These are all showing movements. I wouldn't say they're stuck, but it's an upward inflection.
Okay.
Right? Keeping in mind that the past 6 months, right, we've all been super depressed.
Right.
And now it's bright. If you study US macro, everyone is sad right now.
But would this so-called bright spark, right? I mean, it goes back to the typical thing, right? It's in the markets, right? The markets is not the economy. So maybe we can come back to that. But
right,
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, do you want to address that? We can just
over.
Yeah. So the thing is this, right? markets anticipate on one hand, but they are also lagging on the other hand. So for instance, tourist arrivals, they were already here, in March.
Yeah.
But the markets didn't reflect that. It's a very good way to explain it. The leading indicator, the coincident indicator, and the lagging indicator are composed of different economic indicators, which either forecast in advance, those will go into the indicator, or are late, which will then go into lagging indicator. Right? So not all economic indicators are equal. And some are more equal than others. I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So in respect to your question earlier, right? I don't think there's a need to worry about it. They are accurate.
It's not so much the accuracy, it's in terms of who benefits from this, right?
Yes.
It's most like it's not so easy to translate this sort of gains into the real people and into their wallets, right?
Correct.
You could potentially a counter argument here would be, now when you talk about the differential in the US exchange rate coming down, right?
Yeah.
But any producers who had to raise their prices at that point, they're not going to reduce their prices now. I mean, that's just unfortunately not how a lot of businesses work. If they wanted to, they could, right? If the argument is that businesses reflect the realities of the economic markets, so okay, when the exchange rate was very expensive, they had to increase their prices. Right now, they're not going to. Right now, they are going to pocket the difference, right?
Right. So I just want to clarify, outside of certain segments of society like commodities, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, your inflation, what we are talking about is slowing inflation growth. So it's going from 3 to 2. But it's not going negative,
right,
the way commodities might, right? And we will go into this a bit later. But that means that the prices are actually staying the same elevated levels. That's not going to go away, right? So it's also normal to expect, PPI and PCE not to go down, the supplier side, right?
Yeah.
But I think the stark contrast to draw here, right? Maybe Malaysians might not immediately be obvious lah. If you study US macro and China macro now, you are depressed, man. Right? In contrast, right, we have so much to look forward to in the next 6 months. Okay, so let's move on. And I just want to clarify one last thing, which is that strong fundamentals growth, right, is the best thing you can ask for in terms of a forex strengthening, right, compared to say improving in portfolio capital inflows, because that one can just reverse, right? This one is here to stay. Okay, and of course lastly we come to export imports, right? So of course in the export imports, we also did cover this in the forex episode. The trade account is in Malaysia represents by far the largest needle mover in our forex. And actually, MIDF was actually very nice, or actually very expert, to produce their own version of it. We talk about the real effective exchange rate, right? RER, and that is basically just a trade-weighted exchange rate of ours versus the USD. So think about the current USD MYR. The exchange rate currently today is about 4.4, right? If you take all the basket of goods that we trade with our neighbors, you balance it by a weightage, you use that weight and assign it on top of our MYR Forex to the USD, you will get the RER. Okay? And MIDF's version of the real effective exchange rate is just, they call it TWRI, which is the trade weighted ringgit index. And actually, if you look at the lines here, right, in this chart, okay, on one hand, you will see that the ringgit has improved a lot relative to the USD, but the trade-weighted ringgit index has actually improved even more, right? And MIDF has actually gone on even further to say that it has appreciated against all other currencies within its index. Admittedly, this is their own index, right? But still, it recently had its highest level since April 2023. Okay. Keep in mind, in October 2023, right, we saw the opposite thing, Normally, Forex doesn't fluctuate like this.
Okay.
And this is just great news for the Malaysian economy, okay? Because trade is also, a very big part of the Malaysian economy. This implies we have bigger exports, right? Bigger net exports after you weigh off imports. And it's just the opposite narrative from last year.
Right.
As an economist, right, I just find it hard to believe what I'm seeing. Okay. Hope it's not fake.
Yeah, hope it's not too good to be true.
Yeah, right. Okay, but at least I think we are feeling a bit of it. But they actually did make two caveats which were very surprising. So if you think about what I just said, right, Malaysia's exports doing well, what's the first sector that comes to mind?
Of course it will be our E&E lah.
Right.
Because that's been in the spotlight a lot. Right.
Okay.
So the semicon and all that is all part of that. Secondly, I would guess, I'll take a wild guess, maybe something related to our petrol.
Right. So oil and gas, right?
Oil and gas.
So yes, you are right on both counts. So just for the audience knowledge, I think 30% of our exports is made of the E&E sector, which, as we all know, is actually the semiconductor sector, right? We are like on the back end of the supply chain. Oil and gas obviously is quite intuitive, right? We have Petronas, we export a lot of our good oil and import a lot of the high sulfur oil. So you would think when you see good net export performance, it will be these two sectors.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, according to MIDF, these two are actually the two worst performing sectors. And the reason is actually quite intuitive. The E&E exports came down from a high base last year. Right, so it did very well, and then now it's just doing normal. So of course that would imply negative year-on-year growth, even though it's not actually that bad lah. What was actually bad was the oil and gas sector, right? So this is represented under the mining sector, but they break it down, and oil and gas is a big chunk of it. We all know what is it contributing to this. It's just China's slowdown, right? Economy surprises all the time.
Yeah.
The two sectors you would think are the bastion of Malaysia's exports were actually the two worst performing.
So do we know what other sectors have actually been, the reverse of that actually was surprisingly, delivering all these gains?
They didn't actually say, and honestly, I didn't look into it, but if I had to guess, right, I don't think it's commodities. It would be cars, maybe, right? Because cars tend to be big ticket items. So
okay,
it
something to look into.
Yeah, but I want to clarify one last thing they did say. Even though E&E exports underperformed with the high base last year, they actually outperformed imports. So there's been a lot of semiconductor FDI coming in, right?
Yeah.
So if they are importing now raw materials or spare parts, that implies probably next year's exports will be better, naturally, right? So if I want to go on a tangent, right, you could actually see a very similar phenomenon around 2021, right? On the ground, if you actually did some scuttlebutt, you would actually have realized that there was huge activity that wasn't being reflected in markets yet.
Right, okay.
Right? But in 2022, stock markets just took off, right? So I think if you go down to Bayan Lepas today, right, you might actually see a different story.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so if I could maybe approach this from a counter point, right? I mean, okay, before that, was there anything else?
No.
Top level stuff? Okay.
We're kind of done.
So maybe let's just, with this in the background, right? Let's just have just instigate this a little bit.
Right.
Let me assume the pessimist view.
Right.
Right. So the pessimist view is that I think maybe some of this is exuberance.
Right.
Okay, that it might not last very long. One reason for that I will offer is that, as what we discussed also, there's a lot of FDI in terms of especially data centers. Okay, so there are a lot of data centers that are coming up. Now you start to see a lot of our construction companies also going into building data centers and all that.
Right.
And they are benefiting from two ways: either selling their land assets or actually going into building and managing data centers. Right. A few of them have done that. The problem with these data centers is that it is only as useful as the latest GPUs they have, and the GPUs are going to keep changing very fast, right? So it's a huge investment to get the latest GPUs, which is I think the H100s now, right? So you're going to build, so X company is going to build a data center, they're going to outfit it with H100s, how many nodes they want to do, it's fine. It becomes obsolete as soon as the next one is here, because the cost of replacing it, right, is so massive, and you would not have even gotten your ROI back, and it becomes in a way redundant because computing is moving at such a fast scale right now, right? So my counter to this is that I would not want to be one of those people who run data centers.
Okay.
Right? Because it is going to become obsolete so fast because of the rate at how NVIDIA is developing their chips.
Okay, so do you want to know the real reason why this is happening? Okay,
yes,
so
of course.
Here's the thing, right? Naturally, Malaysians will associate, the FDI in data centers to Malaysian factors, right? And of course, there is also the corollary from how Singapore recently imposed, I think, tax or something, right, on data centers.
Yeah.
So now they're moving over because of cost. I think this is probably something only geo-economic analysts will probably see, right? Do you remember Jensen Huang visiting Malaysia recently?
Yeah.
That was like 2 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So which countries did he visit? Do you still recall?
Indonesia.
Did he visit Indonesia?
Didn't he? No.
No.
Singapore, Malaysia. I'm assuming definitely Taiwan.
Okay, but I mean
in the region.
So Taiwan and China, right? Right. Like whichever side you fall on, it doesn't matter. Okay. So what is China's current semiconductor situation?
I mean, there are different ways of looking at it. One is that
maybe let me narrow it down for you.
Okay.
What is China's current semiconductor trade situation?
Trade situation?
Yes.
Well, they've been kneecapped a bit by not sanctions, the trade barriers by America, right?
Yes.
On the one hand. But on the flip side of that also is that even despite that, they somehow have been able to progress on their semiconductor, right?
So, do you find it a bit notable that the 3 countries that Jensen Huang visited were China, which of course deserves a visit, and then Singapore and Malaysia. I mean, we are two kind of nobodies on the global map, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And why is that?
I mean, I can give you my reason.
Right.
So this is related to sort of what I look at as well. I want to link it to what I was saying just now. So I don't think the issue is the FDIs coming in to build data centers. I think the concern here is local people moving into this, local players moving into this. Okay. So let me explain it this way. Why is, in relation to the question, why is Jensen Huang coming here? Why is Google coming here? Why is Microsoft coming here to invest in data centers?
Okay.
One way of looking at it is because they have no choice, because they have no more energy capacity in America. If you look at energy utilization rates in America, so this is a slightly different topic, right? But if you look at it, they do not have the capacity anymore because of the energy hog that these data centers are.
Yes.
So they have to move out of their countries.
Okay.
No. So from Malaysia's point of view, come, red carpet, FDI.
Right.
From their point of view, actually, it's just that we need your excess power.
Yes.
Malaysia actually has excess power, right?
Yes.
There's a lot more, with all the planned upcoming like renewable energy and stuff like that. These guys are just being very, very strategic. They need to move into a space in the world where they can have the excess energy power because they cannot build in America anymore. You can say simplistic way of looking at it, but if you look at the data in terms of energy utilization in America, they cannot build any more data centers there.
Okay, I want to acknowledge what you say is correct, and I want to address it later. But coming back to this, I would say that is a less relevant reason.
Okay.
And then let me just spell it out. Okay. Even if America puts sanctions on China for semiconductors, right? China is still going to get those semiconductors one way or another.
Yeah.
And the way they do that is by involving a middleman. So it's quite irrelevant that those H100s are going to be a little bit obsolete, right?
Yes.
Because having a H100 is better than not having anything at all.
Yes.
That is why you might have noticed some completely irrelevant sectors have started coming in the semiconductor industry. Right?
Yes.
I mean, we're not talking about those in China where the state government has the ability to, instruct, right? Like the recent multi diversification in semiconductors. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Malaysian companies or totally unrelated sectors suddenly building data centers, right? And why? It's because they have the cash, right? But it is really in service of the wider goal. So does that make a bit more sense than just merely lack of electricity?
So my argument for electricity one is really from in terms of why Microsoft and all that are coming here, right?
Right.
So they need these data centers. There's no question about it.
Correct.
Right? And they have to find other places where they can actually build it.
Yes.
Okay. The second argument is that the local companies, that's why I want to make the distinction. The local players suddenly moving into this space, right?
Right.
Okay. So one of it, you can say that, hey, if everyone's investing in it, I don't want to be left out, right?
Yes.
So they go into this. It's also true, yes, that China are finding very creative workarounds this. There was a report, I think, in New York Times where basically a lot of the Chinese companies, they build shell companies outside so that they can import the chips, and then there are always ways, right? There are always ways to get this done. And China themselves also are really investing a lot in terms of their internal know-how in terms of building next generation chips. Okay. So all of that is going to happen. My argument here is just in relation to what we were talking just now, right? In terms of the outlook and stuff like that. The local companies that are getting into this space, I fear that they are going to get burned at some point. Data center is going to be just a commodity.
Yes.
Right? And the only way for you to stay ahead of it is to constantly invest in the new chips.
Yes.
Because that is the differentiator, right?
Right.
Now, Microsoft, Apples and all that, they will continue to do that. They will always keep investing in the new chips. But when you are the one who owns the building and you're running and then you're trying to find clients to use your data center, and then the client say, but how many nodes do you have of the latest GPU and stuff like that, and you say, oh, ours is still 2 generations old. You straight away you lose your positioning. With all the things coming in here, there's no shortage of data centers that people can go to. It's just a cautionary statement for local players going into this.
Yes. No, it's 100% correct. So I think we already have seen an example of this. Do you remember when there was a construction company deciding to diversify into gloves? Right? So this is just a nature of capitalism.
Are we naming them?
Huh? No, we're not. In fact, I think there were 2, so it's not like we're pinpointing anybody, right? So the idea is basically that when there is, this is just the boom bust cycle of capitalism, right? When there is hype in something, and this exists not just at the social media level, it exists at the listed company level, right? Capital will gravitate towards it, and then what happens is that there will be oversupply, which will then correct prices. Right? This is just a phenomenon of capitalism, and you would argue from a very imperfect standpoint, it's designed that way. Right? That is how information transfer works, and at the expense of the individuals, builds a society, makes it healthy. Okay, but just to go back to what you were saying about how America has no electricity, right? I actually think, first of all, yes, that is true.
Current capacity.
Based on current capacity as well as the extrapolation of usage, right, from current growth, definitely you're going to hit a ceiling at some point. But I think before that happens, again, capitalism, what is going to happen is that they're going to bump into a ceiling on how much energy they can access, and naturally they're going to raise prices, right? Because then the energy price goes up, more demand goes up, and then they will raise prices on AI, and so your growth trajectory is coming down. Right? Keep in mind, right, that the current price setting baseline that OpenAI came out the gate with, $20 per month, is ridiculously low. Right? It's an artificially low price set to weed out smaller competitors. Right? If you're Perplexity now, you're sweating. Yeah, it's artificially low price. I can almost guarantee you in 5 years, right, the price is going to be closer to $50. And then I'll be singing less of a song. Because at 90 ringgit per month, right, that is well within even an individual business, like sole proprietor level of capacity to afford. And you get way more utility out of it than hiring intern. There's no way that the price stays the same. It's probably going to double in 5 years. And then that will curtail the energy growth.
Okay, all right.
Wow, we spent 20 minutes talking about
it can
interesting
be a whole
topics.
episode.
Yeah. All right.
So you want to summarize the episode?
I just want to give a bit of good news to Malaysians, right? If you're a Malaysian business, I did tell this to my friends in business 3 months ago. Indicators are looking up. I think at least until the end of 2024, you have some good news to look forward to. Having said that, this may not be relevant to this episode. US macro is weakening very rapidly. And I think by this time next year, there's a recession. So I'm not going to tell you what to do with your own money. But if you believe what I say is true, there are some logical things you can do. This party will last 1 year probably.
All right. Okay. So make sure you dress up for it.
The right cosplay, right?
Yeah. Okay, all right.
So we criticized the government last year for the weak ringgit, whether they deserve it or not. So I think we should also praise the government for the recent strengthening, whether they deserve it or not. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so that's the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you're liking this kind of content, please like and follow, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.